If you've been beating yourself up about dating a red flag, I need you to understand that there are so many different shades of red. Don't be mad at yourself, okay? Some of them disguise themselves really well. And the good news is I've taken it upon myself to do some field research and date every single type of red flag for you so that you don't have to go through it yourself. On a serious note though, a really good friend of mine asked me to make a video talking through some of the red flags that are more sneaky. And so I figured I would do something a little bit interesting that I've never done before. All throughout my dating life, I had this notes section in my phone, and sometimes these not so great dating experiences would take the form of poetry. So I've outlined several sneaky red flags, and I have a poem to accompany each red flag that I've outlined. Don't judge me. This is just the most raw expression of how I was coming to learn some of the red flags in real time. So the first one is the type of guy who can't stand to see you shine. They kind of like get mad or possessive when the attention is on you or when you step into your power. So here's the poem I wrote about that. I wrote this one on January 8th, 2016. I have the dates stamped on some of these, but not all of them. Beware of the man who rushes to your side when you shed a tear, yet is nowhere to be found when you smile from ear to ear. Beware of the man who lends a helping hand when you're down, but isn't there to celebrate when his queen has found her crown. He isn't for you. You must let him go, because in your heart you know if it doesn't make him feel good, he'd probably never show. This was about someone that I was talking to at that point that just made me feel like he only wanted to be there for me when I was like the damsel in distress, because that made his ego feel good. But when I stepped into my power and when good things were happening in my life, it's like he just wasn't happy for me. And it was such an ick because I'm like, oh, you want me broken. You want me broken. And unfortunately, this is not a glaring red flag because sometimes you meet someone when you're going through something. And so you see the side of them that wants to nurture you and be there for you and be supportive. And when things in your life start looking up, you start to sense a different energy from them. When you are looking better, if you have a glow up or whatever, they start to get in their heads and insecure. And it was only then that I realized like, oh, this is a red flag because I intend on living a very powerful, bright life. And if he's not going to be okay with that, I need to move on to someone else. And this was a great lesson for me to learn because going into searching for a future husband, like that was one of the biggest things that I knew I needed was someone who loved the fact that I was powerful and smart and well-spoken and charismatic and all of those things. And I want the same for you. You want someone who is happy for your happiness. And this goes honestly in dating and in your personal life. Okay, number 2 is, so this one is less about the person and honestly more about where you're at when you met that person. What I have here is when you're trying to replace someone else or fill a void in your life. And in my case, the thing that I'm about to read was actually about my dad. So my dad passed away in 2017 and I wrote this on July 17th, 2017. As I read this now, I'm like, oh, you were not ready to be with anybody at this point in time because you were really trying to replace your dad in a romantic relationship, which is just not gonna be healthy. I just know you're somewhere out there waiting to show me how strangely familiar a stranger could be. Like estranged kin reunited. I just know someday he'll come back to me in another form, skipping the formalities and forming a bond that defies death. I just know it. That we will meet again at a me who is more pure, loving, trusting, and devout. The me that Baba and you always knew I would be. I read this today and I don't know, I wanted to bring in an example of like my own growth, my own evolution of how I see relationships and what role I see that playing in my life. But that version of me, I think I was like 24 or 25, was setting myself up to be in the most toxic relationship. Like if I found someone during that time, it was going to be a relationship that required that person validated me. It was going to be a relationship that was based off of a person who was a father figure and also irreplaceable. Like my dad is still irreplaceable. Ahmed has not replaced my dad. And I'm glad to say that. Like nobody's going to replace what that father figure is in my life. And I shouldn't have been looking for a father figure in a husband. Like, I kind of cringe a little bit when I read that, but I also empathize with the younger version of myself that was healing through a lot of my own stuff and just grieving the big loss that that figure was in my life. So really, red flag number 2 is just like what your intentions are. Are you trying to fill a void? Did you just go through a hard breakup? Did you just go through a life-changing event, whether it's losing someone you love? Are you trying to fill a void with another person? Because no matter who that person is and how great they may or may not be, they will never be able to fill that void for you. You are the only person that can heal through whatever it is that you're experiencing. And I honestly recommend trying to do as much of that as you can on your own before trying to depend on someone else to help you through that. Okay, this one is really short. I know that like commitment issues in a guy is an obvious red flag, like it doesn't qualify as like a sneaky red flag, but there's this specific energy that I feel like is sneaky, and I've captured it really well in this one sentence poem. They should be increasingly excited to have you, not occasionally afraid to lose you. Those words to me are just so powerful because it's like, have you ever been love bombed before? Like they are so excited at the beginning and then they just start fizzling off. That's such a red flag, obviously. And I know we all know that love bombing is just not good, but even if it's not as extreme as love bombing, when you're in a healthy relationship, that person should be increasingly grateful for you. Yes, after the honeymoon phase, yes, after the initial fireworks and sparks and the excitement of a new thing dies down, their depth of love and depth of gratitude should only grow. I have had several not so great situationships where the only time I ever saw that yearn for me was when I started pulling back. And that's a huge red flag. Like they're not grateful for me. In fact, they're taking me for granted. And the only times they act grateful for me is when I pull back or create distance or threaten to leave. So it's a sneaky red flag to be with someone who is only occasionally afraid to lose you. You want to find a relationship where this person is clearly more grateful for you by the day. This is another one that's more about you and less about them. Another sneaky red flag for my girls, when you constantly feel like you have to be strong, when you constantly feel like you have to be guarded. Now, don't get me wrong, in the first several dates or even the first several months, if that's how you feel, I don't want to say several months. In the first couple of months, if that's how you feel, honestly, that's wise in my opinion. Like I will tell my future daughter to have her guard up for the first couple months because you never know. But if after a couple of months of talking to someone, you don't gradually start to feel like you can soften up and you don't gradually feel like you can let your guard down, that is a sneaky red flag because somewhere, somehow, subconsciously, you have some sort of mistrust and some sort of trauma response. Like there's something about this person that might be reminding you of someone else who you knew you shouldn't have trusted. I'll read you the poem here. It's literally called The Strong Woman. And this was about some guy that like desperately wanted me to open up to him and I wasn't opening up to him, and I'm so happy I didn't. I wrote this on June 18th, 2018. He asks if I will ever let him in. I stare in silence. I am way too familiar with this question, but I decide that today I'll resist the urge to say, letting you in my heart is easy, love, but letting you in on my pain will surely chase you away. Men like you are enamored by the mystery, when in reality, you couldn't handle my history. The trauma, the suffering, the fear, the deaths that I've outlived to get here. So I think I'll have to wait a while before letting someone in. For now, I pray the day will come when I don't have to be the strong woman. This has so many different layers to it. I think I was coming into my wisdom of just not having these gut reactions the second I met someone to just trauma dump and tell them everything and trust them. Like I started to be a lot more discerning of people and their intentions. And I noticed this trend. Certain types of guys love strong women. Like they claim to love strong women, but they don't love the fact that you're strong. It kind of speaks to the first red flag that I talked about. They love the idea of like conquering a strong woman. And so as a strong woman, if you actually show them who you are and let them in on the more vulnerable, painful parts of you, they will run away because they just got what they wanted. Like what they wanted was to get you to soften up for them. That's kind of like the thing that gets some of these guys high is the idea of like attracting a strong woman and getting her to trust them, getting her to show them her feelings so that they could feel powerful, that, oh, they got that validation from a strong woman. And so in this particular situation, like I was not opening up to this person at all, because I'm like, first of all, I just met you, calm down. This guy ended up being, if I would have let him, he would have love bombed me. I didn't let him. I played it so smart with him. Like, I was texting him, I was talking to him, I was still feeling him out. The speed that he was moving at and the things that he was saying put me on alert a little bit, and I'm like, okay, this is cute, it's fun, but let me just sit back and observe you a little bit before I give you anything of me. And that was when I was really starting to catch on to some of these things. The next one is when they still have unresolved feelings for their ex. This one was sneaky because in this particular situation, and me, like, I used to know that, like, I would never be in a love triangle, but in this particular situation, this person claimed that they haven't talked to their ex in years. So the way they presented it to me was that they were over her, like it was done, right? And you know, so I'm like, okay, cool. Like, we all have like some residual feelings for people we've been with in the past. Like, you still care about them a little bit. It doesn't mean that like you're not over them. So the way that it was presented to me was that he was over her. But then after a little bit of time, I noticed like, no, he's not over her. He's lying. He doesn't want to work through it. He doesn't want to heal. He just wants to distract himself with another relationship. So I'm telling you some context so you could understand this poem. This person ended up talking to me, and then I basically let him know, like, it's clear you're not over her. I will not be compared to someone else. Go figure it out. Like, if you can't be with her, I don't know what to tell you, but you're definitely not going to be with me. They just didn't understand how irresponsible it is to try to date when you haven't worked through your feelings of an ex. Literally like 2 weeks after he and I broke things off, I found out he started dating this other girl who's like a distant cousin to me. So I was just like, this guy is not trying to work through his stuff at all, but then was still kind of trying to keep a line of communication open with me. And I'm just like, this was my poem that I wrote to myself to let myself know that I'm done and to explain to myself what about that offended me so much. You are not welcome to come over and bring your mess into my home just because you are unhappy living in your own. Instead of waiting on my porch or knocking on my doors, I suggested you head back and handle all your chores. You weren't ready for that kind of labor, so you stayed near while visiting my neighbor. I empathized with you truly while you still practiced what you'd preach. But who said you could find yourself by playing hide, yet still seek? That was a bar. We're gonna drink to that one. That was a bar. I don't know if you've noticed, but like, these red flags, they've become more nuanced. He seemed like a green flag type of guy on paper. This was actually the last person I talked to before I ended up starting to talk to Ahmed. In my mind, I learned so much from that experience because I took him so seriously, because on paper, he checked off all the boxes. On paper, he seemed like such a green flag. It helped me really understand that, like, no, I want someone who's obsessed with me. Like, I want somebody who sees me for everything that I am, and I could never get that from somebody who's just trying to use me as a way to not face his actual feelings. Mind you, this red flag, it's not just about an ex. Even me, like the example I gave, if I had dated somebody seriously right after my dad passed, when I wrote that poem, I would be trying to self-soothe with another person. And if that person was smart, they would break up with me if they knew that. I literally didn't let myself talk to any guy for an entire year after my dad died because I knew I would be trying to replace him. I was self-aware enough to understand that I would be using that person as a way to escape what I was feeling. So it's not just about exes. If someone you're talking to, if you get a sense they're trying to use you to escape their feelings, run in the other direction. This is not to say that you can't be going through something and dating. You just need to be hyper aware of yourself and very fair in understanding that they're not going to heal you. They could potentially be a good facilitator of you healing yourself, but nobody is going to heal you but you. The last one might be the sneakiest of them all. When this person makes you feel that you have to choose between them and yourself. I wrote a couple poems about this, but I want to explain it a little bit more. If being with them requires that you can't also be with you, and this isn't just you, like it's also your family, it's also the things that you love, it's also the things that bring you joy and that you're passionate about. If being with them requires that you abandon yourself or any extensions of yourself, run in the other direction. So I was talking to someone who I felt was gonna make me choose. So I wrote 2 poems. One before I knew for sure, and one after I knew that being with them required that I abandon myself. So the first one before I knew is, I like you and I want you, but I like me and I want me more. You're welcome to stay as long as you don't make me choose. So I wrote that, and then a couple months later, once I realized that like indirectly they were making me choose, I wrote this one. True love will never leave you drowning for its devotion, suffocating for its sincerity, gasping from its gall. Your breath belongs to you and you only. Love would never require you to give that away. Love wouldn't dare ask for it. Love would want you to keep the very thing that gives you life, that is most intimately yours, that brought you here, that is keeping you here, for you first, before it could ever be for another love too. There is a grave difference between that which buries you alive and that which grounds you. Whew. I'm not even trying to gas myself, but I miss writing poetry. I just love the way I kind of like helped myself work through and process some of these red flags, especially that last line. Like, I really don't even think I could explain it better. There's a grave difference between that which buries you alive and that which grounds you. And if you really just think about that, like if you're grounded, yes, you are in the ground, but if you're being buried alive, it seems like the same thing. That's why it's so sneaky, but it's not. It's two very different things. And there are some relationships that bury you alive, and there are some relationships that ground you. Understanding and being able to discern the difference between those two things is being able to detect which relationships require a version of you that is like an empty shell, and which relationships require the version of you that is you, is most authentic to you. Which relationships are not trying to take you away from the things that you love and the things that you are. Which relationships are not asking you to become a version of yourself that you never really consented to in order to be in that relationship. That is probably, in my opinion, sometimes the sneakiest red flag, because in my experience, you don't realize you're there until you're there. Like, you don't realize you're being buried alive until they're like literally dumping dirt on top of you. And it is a very scary feeling because you feel that you've abandoned the only person that's been there for you all along, and that's yourself. I don't wish that on anybody. So if you are dating, if you're talking to someone and you sense that they don't love you for you, they don't love your family for you, they don't love your friends for you, they don't love your career aspirations and dreams for you, it's not worth it, my love. I don't care how cute you think he is. I don't care how successful he is. I don't care about any of those things. You are not going to feel like yourself in that relationship. And worst case scenario, if that relationship comes to an end, you won't know what to go back to, because you'll have to rebuild, and you'll be able to. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not saying you're gonna die. You're not. Even when they bury you alive, you can dig yourself out and start from there. But why let it get to that point if you're able to detect that this person is intent on taking you away from yourself? Don't let them do that. Nobody should be able to do that. Nobody. I don't care. Not even your kid. Nobody should take you away from you. This was so fun. I've never done anything like this before. I have a lot more poetry, but I wanted to zoom in on the ones that came from red flags or came from toxic dating experiences. Most of my poems are like a little more happy. These ones were like the scorned woman type genre, I guess. I really hope they helped you kind of bring some perspective to your dating life and make you feel more powerful going into your next date, your next relationship, where you know what to look for, but more importantly, you know how you want to feel. I love you so much, and as always, stay powerful, my love.